Hello. All right, let's talk about Chapter 2 of Of Mice and Men. I have your questions here, and I'm going to kind of help explain them or do the best I can. The first one that was brought up was the setting of the story. So we have now arrived at this farm, and that's where George and Lennie are going to be for the rest of the story. So there's kind of a lot going on. On this farm in particular, there's like the fields where people work. There's the bunkhouse where the workers live. And then there's like the house of the boss and of Curly. So like, okay, I thought the best was to draw this the best I can. So like imagine the fields are back here, right? Like this is on a huge plot of land. So the fields are in the back. It almost would be like this then. Fields are in the back. The bunkhouse, sorry, this is backwards because cameras. The bunkhouse is near the fields, but more like out of the way. They can't be by the houses up here. The bunkhouse is where all the workers live. So that's where George and Lennie live. That's where Slim lives. That's where like all of the farm's hands live, and then they move into the fields to work during the day. In the front of the land, so like your front yard, if you want to think of it that way, we have, it's over here. So the boss, or like Curly's dad, lives in his own house, and then Curly and his wife live in another. And there's actually like a barn on here too. It's maybe like in the middle. Just understand, like you don't need to know diagrams or anything like that, but just understand that everything is taking place on the same property. So the fields where everyone's working, George and Lennie are working, they're on the same property. Curly and his wife live on the property. All of the farm hands live on the property, and so does the boss. So that's really all you need to know about this setting. It kind of jumps from place to place. Crooks, who you've met but haven't like interacted with within the story, lives on his own because of his race. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. There's like segregation going on, things like that. Other than that, that's what you need to know about the ranch itself. And someone else had another question about the layout. Oh, what are George and Lennie doing on the ranch? What are their like jobs and such? I'm not 100% sure. I know that historically speaking, they like moved hay or like plowed and things like that, but they don't explicitly say what their jobs are in the story. It's not that important. Just know they are doing typical farming field work. The next thing I have is, why was the boss so hesitant to employ them in the first place? So what happened was, first off, they were late, which isn't a really good sign. You should never be late to your first day, right? And then what ends up happening is George told Lennie, like, don't say anything. Like, I will do all the talking. And the boss found this very skeptical. He could pick up that Lennie was not all there, right? And he thought George was taking advantage of him, or like was taking his pay, so he didn't want to bring them in for that point. But obviously he did, and now they work on the farm. So that's what happened there. Where are they in the ranch? Who's Curly's wife? And what's her role? What's her significance? First and foremost, Curly's wife does not have a name. She will be only referenced as Curly's wife. That is super important to understand. And also what that kind of means or represents for that time period. So Curly's wife she's there, and so Curly is very distant in their marriage. They don't really interact. They don't really get along. So you can kind of pick up the idea that she's kind of lonely. She doesn't have a lot of companionship, and she's being very stereotypical, like kind of flirty, like stuff, whatever. So she just like, in reality, she's just lonely. But at first it kind of comes off as she's trying to be flirty and things like that. Her role for now, she is just something that needs to be avoided. She is going to cause problems if they interact with her. So that's why George tells Lennie to stay away from her. Her significance, what I would say to that is, think about how women are treated during the 30s or in retrospect, later, and think of it in retrospect of how she doesn't even have a name. So what is that telling us as an audience? I would say that's showing how women weren't known to be significant. They were the wives, right? They were supposed to do wifely duties. They didn't have their own identities, and that's what Steinbeck is trying to represent through not having a name. her just kind of being there and to cause issues. So that's what you need to know about her. My final question was about the time frame. So how long is this book in days? It's not very long. I'm not going to tell you how long yet because I think it's more fun to tell you at the end of the book when it all unravels. But let it be known that currently only a couple days have passed. It hasn't been very long. So that's all the questions I have for today, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Last one, and this actually goes in hand with the questions you had to answer for this chapter. So my last question, or one of the last questions on your worksheet, was in regards to the idea of killing out of love and mercy. And don't worry, a lot of students kind of have a trouble with this concept. So my best example or best way of explaining this is if you understand the idea of, not to be dark, but euthanasia. So if you don't know what that means, think of putting down a pet. So they're old, they're maybe in pain, they're going blind, they're just kind of on the last leg of their life, but they aren't quite dead. And we put pets down at that point when they're not living a good life anymore. So the idea of killing out of love and mercy is putting down a pet because they aren't doing well. They aren't living a good life anymore. You care about them, so you don't want them to suffer anymore. And we see this in the story, and it's actually with the dog. So we met Candy. He's one of the farm hands, and he literally doesn't have a hand. No pun intended there. But he has this dog, and Carlson wants to put it down because it's old. It's like kind of just, it's not living a good life anymore. But Candy doesn't want to put it down because he's had it since he was a pup. So it's this dilemma of Candy knows that it's old and probably in pain, but he loves it so much, like it's hard to decide, like, do you put the dog down even like because you care about it, or do you continue to let it live? So that's that concept, and that is kind of the answer to that question on your worksheet, is we saw it through Candy's dog. And you might want to think about how, if we're talking about that and bringing it up, that it might come up later. Maybe Candy's dog is foreshadowing. Think about it. Anyways, those are my questions for chapter 2. If you have any other ones, please email me and I'll answer them the best I can. If you have questions on chapter 3, please make sure that you leave them for me so I can do this again. But yeah, have a good day and I will see you later. Bye-bye.